Hello, welcome to Worth Quoting, a production of Florida Community College's Open Campus. I'm Edythe Abdullah, Assistant Dean of Continuing Education and Lifelong Learning, and with me today is a very exceptional young woman, Dr. Winnie Taylor, who is an accomplished young woman, an author, a professor, a chairman, just about everything that you could think of. She is currently Professor of Law at the University of Florida, Holland Law Center, and a mother of an 8-year-old son, and chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, Jacksonville Branch. Thank you for being with us today, and welcome, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are such an accomplished person at a young age. What brought you to where you are, and how did you get involved in the Federal Reserve Bank?
Well, I suppose, like most people, a combination of things. The law degree put me at the University of Florida, where I am teaching contracts and consumer protection and equal employment discrimination law. But I've also been involved in some consumer banking issues, and I've published quite a bit in that area. I've published a lot in the areas that deal with federal regulations, and some of those regulations are drafted and overseen by the Federal Reserve Board. So some of my work in consumer banking has been brought to the attention of the Federal Reserve. And having done some consulting for the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C., I suppose I can say that I'm not completely surprised that the Fed asked me to serve on this board.
Mm-hmm. So the experience for you has been very enjoyable then?
Oh, it has been. An eye-opener. It's one thing to read about the Federal Reserve and what the Federal Reserve does and how it works. It's quite another thing to be there and see it in operation.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you've learned that makes it interesting and different.
Well, first of all, I've learned that what I am doing at the Federal Reserve and serving on this board is something that I have been convinced is significant. What I do is assess the economic situation in the North Central Florida area, and I report this information to the Federal Reserve. This is information that the Federal Reserve needs from people who are out in the field. It's not anything that they can just get out of the book, or if they get it out of the book, it's dated. Mm-hmm. They want to know as early as possible about the socio-economic conditions of people in the areas, about what is going on in the commercial industry, the things that are making a difference for different businesses and consumers as well. So that I try to track that information, mm-hmm. Collect it and bring it to Jacksonville every month, and then it is submitted to the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta, and that bank in turn takes it to Washington, D.C., to the Federal Reserve governors. And then the Board of Governors collects this information from across the country, and they use it in making their determinations about monetary and fiscal policy for this country.
Wow. So we can see just by you being here that our impact, our interests are being served.
Well, they definitely are being recorded.
They're definitely being recorded.
That's right. And again, I think they are being served, and I think that this information is important and helpful.
Mm-hmm. Now, the information that you gather, is it both subjective and substantive? Do you talk to people about their feelings and what's happening in the world in general?
I do. I talk to them about how things that are happening either nationally or internationally might affect them locally. The impact that the deficit might have on how the local businesses are run. The impact of foreign trade on the local economy, looking at things such as the minimum wage and what differences that would make. We've talked about the S&L crisis and how that might impact in this local area. And then we do get to things that are completely regional. We look at when weather conditions become unusual in the Florida area, how that might impact on crops and perhaps the prices of goods once they reach the consumer markets. Mm-hmm. So that, and we do ask people what they think, because the Federal Reserve wants to know people's perceptions of what is going on, as well as their reality, to see if those things are meshing. So it's a combination of the objective and the subjective, and it's that combination that makes it most interesting for me.
Okay, I understand. What are the current trends now then for economic policies? We've got a new administration coming in. We're wondering what's going to happen with money and interest rates, etc. What are going to be the current trends in the next couple of years?
Well, I think that a lot of people believe that it's too early to tell with any degree of definiteness with the new administration. Not giving overt signals of exactly where it's going. I think it's going to take us some time to assess and predict with any degree of confidence as to what we're going to be looking like fiscally. But once you know that the new administration has inherited such a deficit, and once you look at the savings and loans and the thrift situation, and once you look at indications that inflation is at an uncomfortable level, I don't think that it takes a whole lot of waiting to realize that some major things will need to happen in the immediate future.
Is the feeling that Bush is going to be competent enough to deal with those and put us on the right track, hopefully?
Well, let's say that that feeling is mixed. And again, these are opinions of individuals. Let me not misrepresent where the Federal Reserve is on a lot of things. But let me say that the people who collect information for the Federal Reserve are as varied in their opinions and ideas as to whether or not the Bush administration will be able to handle things competently and expeditiously, as well as those who are more skeptical about the success of the administration. So that, again, that's part of what makes this interesting, because you don't have a group of people who are just echoing each other's thoughts. You have a lot of people who are thinking differently about the administration, about fiscal policy, about the direction in which the country ought to be headed. And I think that the Federal Reserve probably has, by design, selected a group of people who want to candidly and openly let them know their thoughts about this as the feds try to figure out what's the best course that this country ought to take.
With situations like our homeless situation and drugs in the street and other problems that we face as a country, does that affect some of the policy decisions and the things that you all contemplate in this process?
I think that those things have an indirect effect, because one of the things that we do look at is unemployment.
Okay.
And once you start looking at that secondary market, that underground market, a lot of people who may otherwise be gainfully and fully employed legitimately and so forth are knocked out of the market by participating in all of the illegitimate businesses that are going on. So to the extent that we have people who are underhoused or who are poorly housed, and we have some areas that are economically deteriorating, when you have some economically depressed areas, and when you have some attitudes that are not healthy, you really have to take all of that in account when you're talking about getting an accurate picture of where fiscal and monetary policy ought to be made and the impact for everybody, and as opposed to a few.
That's good to know that all of that is taken into account. I want to change the subject and talk about a recent speech you made at Women's Center Women's History Month celebration. You discussed world history. What if women had been in charge all along? Very interesting topic. What was your opinion and your conclusion? What if women had been in charge?
Well, I have been giving a lot of thought to the subject, and what I concluded was that if women had been in charge all along, I really believe that we would have a more compassionate world with perhaps fewer wars and with a little bit more deliberateness in trying to figure out how to resolve some of the problems. As I mentioned in the speech, I don't think women would have been as trigger happy as a lot of the male leaders have been. And I do think that the problems such as world hunger and inadequate medical care, I think that those would be significantly reduced had women been at the front lines all along.
So you don't believe that the feminine intuition and the feminine touch and our connection with humanity is a bad thing to have?
In fact, I think it's one of our greatest assets.
Okay.
And I think that where a lot of people, in my opinion, get off track is to try to overlook that very important dimension. Call it a feminine mystique, if you will, but I think that it's something about it that intuitively can move things along progressively to get things done with a humanistic focus. If women had been in charge, I really think that a lot of the emphasis would have been on human rights and on equality of opportunity. And I tell you, without anyone being able to refute this, it's certainly nice to have these kinds of thoughts.
That's true. That's very true. Well, you looked at history. What about where women stand now? Are we the power brokers in the world, or are we moving in that direction?
I think it's probably more accurate to say we're moving in that direction. And this is not to discount the progress that women have made. I do believe that that's significant. But I think that it's still ebbing along, and it is not at the level where a lot of people, including myself, would like to think. But women are making their ways into boardrooms, and women are heading businesses, and women are becoming more conscientious about world problems and politics. And I think women are becoming less fearful to get involved. I think women honestly believe that we have something to say, it's worth listening to, and it might make a difference in improving the world.
And that's half the battle in itself, just recognizing that fact.
That's right. I think a lot of it is a confidence game, and in this positive sense, that is having the inner confidence that you do have something to offer, and that in putting together your ideas, it might create a positive result.
There's also an element of risk-taking in that too. I mean, you have to put yourself on the line and try something different, something new, try the opportunity to contribute.
That's true, and you ask me about getting to this position and so forth. I suppose I could be called a risk taker, and if I were to be in a position to encourage other women to step out, it would be to take more risk and to fear failure less. I can't say that I've never been afraid, but I can say I've been more afraid to not try these things than I have been to count the successes and the losses, because from the losses I've learned a whole lot. And believe me, it's instructive to have learned and profited from some mistakes, because you know some things not to ever do again.
That's true.
Yeah.
My grandmother used to tell me, it will make a better woman out of you, no matter what it is.
I can tell I like your grandmother already.
How about being a black woman and dealing with the way of the world now? How did you handle that, and what advice would you give to other black women?
Well, how I handled it was to recognize that a black woman is in a unique position. It is not the same position as a white woman. And so recognition of that fact keeps me conscious that there will be some dimensions that I can add from the benefit of my historical background. And so believing that that is something positive, and believing that the world can learn from some things that I have uniquely experienced, I put that out front. I don't try to hide that, and I don't want anybody else to do that. So I walk with my intellect and my genes side by side.
Okay.
And then we talk and we discuss, and I really engage other people to share in what has been learned from the uniqueness of my own background. So what I encourage women to do is to not to try to duplicate and to try to mimic or model someone else. But I think the beauty in all of this is to learn and to do and still be yourself with the benefit of everything that your history has taught you.
That's very difficult for black women to do because, you know, the press and the environment, the workings of the world is to, you know, get you to, do you change your hair, you change your look, you change your color, you, in order to be a success, do whatever it takes.
Well, I won't say that you don't have to make some adjustments along the way. And let me say that the woman you see today probably was not the same woman in total 15, 20 years ago, but I didn't forget, and I didn't lose it. I've always kept the heritage in the forefront of my mind and my thinking, even though it may not have comported in the eyes of other people with my actions. And I'm a realist when it comes to dealing in this world and in this society. And there are prejudices out there. There is still discrimination, both overt and covert. And being a black woman, it is dangerous for me to forget that. But being a black woman, I also have to develop ways to deal around it.
Yes.
You know, I don't say it's not there. I say it is there, but how am I going to still get to where I want to get in spite of it all? And so that's where I spend my energy, trying to hold on to who I am as I try to accomplish the things that I think are important in life.
Okay. Would you look at your experiences in the growing up in the 50s and 60s as contributing to where you are in your view of how black women have to do this kind of synthesis of ideas and heritage and culture to survive?
I do think that the background and the early years were instrumental. And while I don't favor discrimination and segregation and all of the horrible things that were even more overt in the 50s when I was growing up, I do know that those things had such an impact on my life because discrimination is not theoretical to me. And it's not something that I can say, well, that's in the past or that happened to other people. It's something that I have felt and that I have seen personally in my life. So I don't have a vicarious situation here where I have to try to feel what somebody else felt. I think that when you experience those kinds of things and when you live through that kind of system, and when you have black teachers, both male and females, who take you under their wings to try to make you knowledgeable about the kind of world that you're going out into, when you have people who are leveling with you and who are being honest, see, I think those are the things that have made a difference in my life. My fear is that a lot of the younger people today are not getting that home training in the sense of full recognition of what the obstacles are, along with some good instructions on, but this is not fatal. And the goal is not to depress you or to oppress you, but the goal is to make you acutely aware of how difficult it is, but to also charge you up for the battle so that you can make your contribution.
So you don't forget what you have to accomplish and what you have to overcome in order to be a success, but at the same time you don't discount the world as it is.
That's right, that's right. And I think that that is becoming more and more difficult to teach. We were taught it not as much with a consciousness of teaching it, because when you're living in a segregated neighborhood, when you go to segregated schools, when you go to a segregated college, when your early experiences have all been related to some form of segregation. These things are in your conscious mind as opposed to your subconscious.
And what amazes me sometimes is the lack of understanding of that situation occurring in our day-to-day life. I recently had a conversation with a friend who could not understand my identification of a discriminatory statement or discriminatory situation because that was foreign. She had not grown up in that kind of situation, so she couldn't relate to it.
Yeah, and a lot of people will say that probably women of my generation and your generation, they may call us too sensitive. Mm-hmm. We're overly sensitive and we're reading into things that are not really there, and we're creating problems. And I just defy that at every level, because I think that the problem is not we're creating problems. The problem is that we're a part of a history that will lead our minds to even contemplate the possibility that discrimination has happened to us or has occurred, or that we have to spend all of this energy trying to sift through what was meant and how it was meant and how to interpret it. And to me, that's part of the shame of it all.
What about young women today? What kinds of words of wisdom would you give to them, and where they ought to go and what they need to concentrate on to be successful?
I would tell the young women today that it's all about guts. You know, it really is. Somehow you have to figure out a way to overcome the fear. I think that the intellect is there, and I think that women have to recognize the importance of sharpening the intellect. I mean, we're fighting a battle here for equality of opportunity. I think that it'll be a sad commentary to say that we win this battle and we don't have people who have sharpened themselves to fulfill these corporate positions and these other humanitarian positions that we're trying to open up. So that what I would tell women is to not give up because they believe that sexism is the dominant view and that women will not make it to the top. I just tell them they have to have the faith, and that they should surround themselves with positive thinking people.
Okay.
And if they cannot get it in their hometowns, they should get some long distance numbers, and they should find some support groups and talk to people who are about making some positive changes. And I tell women that all over the country, because in the long run I found that we really do need each other.
That's true.
And this is a horrible experience to go through solo. It's just so much more meaningful. And I think women can become more impactful if they learn that it's not an individual experience. It's not that you're the only one who may be feeling these things or thinking these things. And I think that there is strength in knowing that there are other people out there who are fighting the same battles.
I agree with that totally. We have lost something, I think, women, because our mothers and our grandmothers did not experience the things that we've gone through. So they have not been able to nurture us and tell us how to deal with political situations. So it behooves those of us that are here to support each other.
That's right. That's right. And I always say our grandmothers and mothers gave us the best that they have. And I think that we have to appreciate that and realize that what that has done is to put us in a position to make sure that we give the best that we have to offer to the women who are going to have to come after us.
That's true. That's true. You've got a son. I've got 3 sons. We talked a little bit about the importance of nurturing those black males too, and making sure that they get all that they can have and the wealth of experiences. I know you've taken your son to Africa to try to expand his horizons too. Tell us a little bit about your parenting and how you weather the storm of single parenting.
Well, my son is a handful, like I'm sure most kids are. And again, I don't want anyone to sit and look at me and say, look at that woman, a single parent, a professor, chairman of the board, and all of these things, and think that I'm saying, go out, women, and choose this. You might choose it if you want to, but I think that what you should do is make the best of the situation that you find yourself in, and not let any of it keep you from going the course that you want to go. With my son, I've met wonderful people who help me. And so one of the things that I have to say, especially to women, if you really want to do something and you really want something, there will be people to help you. That has been the most inspirational thing for me, is that starting at the University of Florida teaching law and having my son in my first year of law teaching and moving to a new town, there were some good people in my neighborhood. There still are. I still have faith in finding good people in this world. And those people have been supportive and helpful and have helped me to manage things to the point where I can accomplish some of the things that I want to accomplish.
So again, it's a matter of building a network and a support group.
That's right. And reaching out for it. A lot of times it won't come to you. You have to look for it, but you also have to want it badly enough. Make no mistake about it. I think part of it has to do with tenaciousness.
Yeah, hanging in there.
Hanging in there and wanting it badly enough, and recognizing the importance of it to go out and to do everything you can to make it happen. It just never dawned on me that at least a half of what I would attempt to do wouldn't work. Now, the scary part was that I didn't know which half I would end up with. But I just refused to believe that you can put this kind of energy and this kind of time and this kind of commitment into something without having a few positives. Now, about my son in Africa, I will have to count this as one of the major parental things that I have done, and it will definitely be a hallmark for me. We went to Senegal, and for my son to be in a country that is completely run, at least from what we could see, by black people, the government, the pilots, everybody doing life in everyday activity, being in the majority.
That must have been wonderful.
It was, and then it gave me a way to communicate with him about some of the differences, because conceptually a lot of the kids today cannot see or understand some of the things that we're talking about.
That's wonderful. That is fabulous. I am so glad to have had this opportunity to interview you today. You're a remarkable young woman, having done all that you have, and I thank you for your words of wisdom. And I thank you for joining us on Worth Quoting. Please join us again. Watch the schedule on Channel 35 for all of our Worth Quoting programs. Have a good day.